mention something too, because I've just published a page about the Boston Globe. This is kind of as quiet as I can find a place to talk right now. I noticed one of my videos. Sometimes my videos get taken over by wind or traffic, that kind of thing, and you can't hear what I'm saying. So I just try to find a quieter place to talk. The thing is, it's an interesting question. You know, what do you do with people when they get out of jail? You know, I mean, I'm not talking about immigration right now. I'm talking about because the way that the article said something in the Boston Globe about homeless shelter officials screening people to find out if they're in the sex offender registry before they take them as residents, and I've just never even heard of that. No, I mean, it's as far I would be very, very surprised if that were true. But then the question is also, I mean, are you then begging the question, should homeless shelters not take people who are sex offenders, right? Who have been deemed by the system allowable to be, you know, out of jail? And of course, you know, well then, where are they going to stay? You know, you can't just turn people down the street and then not, like, make it impossible for them to have a place to live anywhere at all. You can't do that, right? So what do you do about that? And these are all interesting questions. I mean, there are people who stay homeless for years and years and years and years. The entire population is subject to serious neglect. The entire situation is subject to serious neglect. And as I've said before, in the long term, it costs more to let a system just kind of falter and fester and not really address what it's all about. You know, and you have the homeless population has a lot of different parts to it. You know, I've said it before. There's drug addiction. There's lack of education. There's people who were born into situations that basically destined them to be homeless from the day that they were born, right? I mean, they have you know, no education and no personal skills, no professional skills. The world that they live in is might as well be on the other side of the universe from the world of the people who are in a position to make decisions about what happens to them. You know, at the sort of the upper echelons of anything whatsoever. You know, government, other types of policymakers. There's just no. It literally is like living in another world. And a high percentage of people who stay homeless for a long time, that's the world that they are living in. That's where they're from. And it would take a lot of serious rehabilitation effort, time, money, resources invested in the system, in people that you hire to work with these people. You know, I mean, everyone who works in a homeless shelter really ought to have at least a bachelor's degree in social services or psychology. People who, it'd be better if they had even a higher degree than a bachelor's degree, because you think about just all of the problems that people have in those places, and all of those people put together. You know, people getting out of mental hospitals, people who should be in a mental hospital, people who are the victims of domestic violence, people who have been the victims of sexual abuse, people who are abusers. I mean, it's just you have everything in a homeless shelter. It's in the shelter system, and it's like you can't just treat people like they're the dregs of society, year after year after year after year, and you know, treat them as if it doesn't really matter what happens to them, and expect the situation to get any better, because it won't, right? I mean, if you are willing to start with the idea that they're still human beings, you know, which is kind of what you need to do, then you also have to treat them like they are, right? I mean, invest the money, invest the time, you know, pay people to work in those places, give them, you know, in such a way that it makes it worth their time, because you're just not going to get the people who have the most education, who have the most empathy, who are the brightest, and who are in it for the long haul, if you don't, you know, make the pay competitive, make sure they have benefits, make sure it's a working environment that's supportive of them. I mean, because you're asking them to do one of the hardest jobs there is, which is to take care of a diverse population. And the diversity common denominator is very, 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 very screwed up lives, right? In all sorts of ways, some of which would intersect, many of which intersect. And the way things are now, it's just, you know, I mean, basically you're just cycling people through. And I've said that before, you know. And certainly I'm not trying to say that I'm fond of sex offenders, because I'm not. But I certainly didn't want there to be any sort of implication from what I wrote today that you can't, you turn them out on the street in New England and say, oh, you can't come into a homeless shelter, or you can't come into any homeless shelter because you're a sex offender. But then, of course, there's the question of, well, if they can't be in regular homeless shelters, do you put them in special homeless shelters only for sex offenders, right? Thereby stigmatizing the ones who might be able to improve, and also putting them all together in such a way that they may just start, bonding with each other, and planning crimes together, or letting each other know about, pedophile rings online, other types of things. I mean, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do in these situations? But there's a lot to be said about the need for jail reform. There's a lot to be said about the need for, the psychiatric system reform, being reformed. I can speak at this time pretty directly to the need for reform of homeless shelters. Whether or not it's going to get me thrown out of the Pine Street Inn, if anybody who works there decides to listen to this video, I honestly couldn't say. So I haven't been talking about it all that much, but it's an ongoing issue. It has been for a long time.